I still remember that night like a scar carved into my mind. The living room was full of people in black suits and fake tears. My father's portrait sat on the table, his smile frozen in a frame while everyone whispered about inheritance and lawyers. I stood near the corner, hands shaking, my heart numb. It was my 18th birthday, the day I thought my life would finally start. Instead, it ended. When the lawyer opened the will, I watched my two older brothers grin as they were handed everything. The family business, the houses, even Dad's vintage cars. Then the lawyer turned to me and said, "For you, Ethan, your father left this." He handed me a small black box. Inside was an old phone, locked, dead, and useless. Everyone laughed softly, even my brothers. "Guess Dad didn't trust the baby with real money," one of them said. I forced a smile, but inside something cracked. That night, while they celebrated their inheritance, I sat in my old truck staring at that phone, wondering why Dad, the man who raised me to work hard and dream big, left me nothing but a locked screen. I didn't know it then, but that phone held a secret that would burn everything they built to ashes. 150 words later. Natural intro placement. My name's Ethan Cole. Back then, I was just a broke kid from a small town in Missouri, the youngest of 3 brothers who all thought I'd never make it without Dad's help. He ran Cole Timber and Steel, a company everyone in town respected. My brothers, Adam and Luke, were already running parts of it, while I was the kid who'd rather draw house plans and fix old radios. Dad used to say I saw things differently, but after he passed, I realized different doesn't count for much when greed gets involved. For weeks, I tried to unlock that phone. Nothing worked. The screen stayed black. But deep down, I couldn't let it go. Dad never did things without reason, and if he left me this, it meant something. I just didn't know that once it turned on. It would destroy everything my brothers stole. The days after Dad's funeral felt like walking through fog. My brothers took control of everything fast, meetings, contracts, the house. I was barely allowed near the office. "You're too young," Adam said once, smiling like he was doing me a favor. Luke didn't even bother pretending to care. He handed me a check, $10,000. "Take it," he said. "Start a little life somewhere else. It's better than a locked phone, right?" That smirk on his face burned into my chest. I walked out of that mansion and never looked back. I rented a tiny studio on the edge of town, working late nights cleaning old machine parts for a mechanic who barely paid enough to eat. But every night I'd stare at that phone. Dead screen, no clue. Still, something about it felt alive, like it was waiting. One night, I remembered Dad's old saying, "If something doesn't work, maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's protecting something." So I took the phone apart carefully. Inside, I found a tiny SD card. No SIM, no messages, just that chip. I didn't have a laptop, so I borrowed one from the mechanic's office when he left early. I plugged it in, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared. For Ethan. My heart started pounding. Inside, there was only one video file, dated 2 weeks before Dad died. I pressed play. The screen showed Dad sitting in his office. His voice was tired, like he'd aged overnight. "Ethan, if you're watching this, something's happened. I don't trust Adam and Luke anymore. They've been forging documents, taking money out of company accounts. I was planning to fix it, but I think they know. I left you proof, everything, in a place only you'll find. Follow what's in the note hidden inside the phone's case." I froze. I had taken the phone apart completely, but I hadn't checked under the back panel properly. My hands shook as I flipped it again and scraped under the lining. There it was, a folded note taped under the battery compartment. I unfolded it and saw just a few words. "The old cabin by the mill. Trust no one." The next morning I drove out there before sunrise. The cabin was half rotten, surrounded by wild grass and silence. It used to be Dad's weekend place where he'd take me fishing when I was little. Inside, everything was covered in dust, except for a small locked drawer in the desk. I searched every corner until I found the key taped under a loose floorboard. When I opened it, I found a thick brown envelope labeled Cole Timber Accounts, Private. Inside were papers, bank transfers and handwritten letters from Dad, all pointing to one thing. My brothers had been stealing from him for years. They'd planned to push him out even before he got sick. But what hit me hardest was the last page. A transfer document with my name as the future owner of the entire company. Dad had already signed it. He just never got the chance to file it. I sat there in the cabin, shaking, angry, and heartbroken. My own brothers, the ones I shared a childhood with, had destroyed everything. That day, I made myself a promise. I won't just take back what's mine. I'll make them watch me do it. I left that cabin with my head full of papers and my hands shaking so hard I could barely drive. The town looked the same. Same diner, same hardware store, same people pretending not to notice when I walked by. But inside me, something had changed. The phone, the video, the envelope. They were small things, but they were enough to pull a thread. Pull the thread and the whole sweater might unravel. I needed help. I couldn't face Adam and Luke with a bent-back kid's courage. They had lawyers, bank connections, and friends in the council. I had a stack of Dad's handwriting and a note taped under a phone battery. That's not power. But it was evidence, and evidence is a kind of weapon if you know how to use it. The first call I made was to Maria Henson. She'd been with Cold Timber since before I was born. The office manager, the woman who ran payroll, who knew every invoice and every vendor. When I told her what I had, she didn't gasp or cry. She said, "Bring it in. Lock the door. Sit down." She believed me in a way strangers rarely did. We spread the papers on her kitchen table. Coffee steamed. The sun came through the curtains like an audience. Maria read slowly, like she was tasting every line. When she hit the transfer sheets, her hand went white. "Those signatures," she said finally. "They match. My God, Danny. They match." She looked at me like I was someone else, the kid she used to hand envelopes to. This isn't small bookkeeping. This is theft. They carefully siphoned money into shell accounts. They created phantom projects. They used company labor for private jobs. Whoever did this knew accounting tricks most people never see. "How long?" I asked, my voice thin. "Years," she said. "At least 5, maybe more. Your dad trusted them. He signed papers because he thought it was for the company. He didn't know they were making him sign away his own voice." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a battered address book, thumbed through it, then pressed a number into her phone. "You need a lawyer who won't be bought. I know one, old Sam Lowe. He's retired, lives on the edge of town, but he still remembers how to fight. If anyone can help, it's him." Sam Lowe was exactly what Maria said. He smelled like sawdust and tobacco, had a face carved by years of courtroom battles, and a slow way of speaking that made you believe he was thinking every word before he let it out. When he saw the papers, he didn't jump. He didn't cheer. He sat back and said, "We'll build an audit. We'll trace the money. It's a hell of a job, son, and it'll cost. We don't have the funds, but maybe we don't need them." "How?" I asked. My chest hurt. The nights were long. My check from the mechanic barely covered rent. Sam tapped a pile of business cards on his desk. "We go where the money left. Banks leave tracks. Shell companies leave trails if you know where to look. If your dad kept copies, we can use them to get subpoenas. If the town's bank managers are crooked, we file complaints with the state. It's messy. It's public. And it scares men who built their fortunes on polite smiles. You think it'll work?" I said. "I think you have the courage to try." That's half the fight. That afternoon, we made a plan. Maria spent days pulling payroll records from memory, checking old ledgers she'd kept at home. Sam drafted letters, walked them to courthouses, and coughed as he did it. I spent nights cleaning and days gathering whatever else I could. Old receipts, faded delivery slips, a photograph of Luke standing in front of a new cabin that Dad never got to finish. Every scrap mattered. But the brothers weren't dumb. People like Adam and Luke don't get rich by accident. Within a week, I noticed subtle changes. The trucks that used to come to our family yard were rerouted. The office receptionist who always smiled at me suddenly pretended not to know me. The bills at my little studio were paid late with explanations that sounded rehearsed. One day, while I was sweeping in the back lot of the mechanic's garage, a pickup rolled up slow and paused. Adam's driver peeked out, then drove off. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Drop it, kid. You don't know what you're doing. Walk away, no signature, no guilt. Just a threat, thin and polite." It could have scared me. It didn't. It lit something colder. I started sleeping with the cabin papers under my shirt. I learned how to keep my phone on silent and my eyes always on the road. I began leaving the mechanic early and visiting bank branches, asking innocuous questions. Sometimes I just watched the courthouse doors and listened. We were making progress. Sam managed to get a court order to look through one of the shell company's books. The auditor found layers of transfers, small ones, then bigger ones, until they ended up in a Cayman account. It was a spider web, and our little stick of proof had started to move the spider. Then, 2 nights before Sam's scheduled hearing, I checked the account registry again and found something that froze me colder than the first threat. A wire transfer pending, a big one, headed to a lending firm in the city, with instructions to move assets out of the country within 48 hours. The account number was masked, but the timestamp was clear. Someone was trying to pull the money out before we could stop them. I called Sam. His voice on the phone was quiet. They move fast when they smell weakness. What do we do? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, we accelerate. We file emergency motions. We have to freeze anything tied to those accounts tonight. And Danny, don't go anywhere. They'll try to scare you. I stood in my tiny kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and the papers heavy in my hands. The town outside went on with its small talk and its weekly chores. My brothers were somewhere in that town, likely in a comfortable chair, sipping something expensive and smiling at a life they thought they'd kept. They were wrong. They always had been. Tonight the transfer would either disappear into thin air or we would stop it. Either way, nothing would be the same after 48 hours. That night felt like a slow explosion waiting to happen. The whole town was asleep, but my mind wasn't. I sat at my small kitchen table, every paper from Dad's old lockbox spread in front of me. Numbers, signatures, property deeds, all written in that familiar bold handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 17. Every sheet was a reminder that my father might have trusted the wrong people, his own sons. Sam had warned me not to go anywhere near Adam or Luke until we had something legally binding. But patience never ran in my blood. Around midnight, I drove to the old coal timber mill, the one Dad built with his own 2 hands before the expansions, before the money, before greed. The gates were half open, a single light glowing from the office upstairs. I knew that glow. Luke always worked late, not because he loved the company, but because he loved control. I parked across the street and walked up quiet. Through the glass window I saw him, sleeves rolled, phone to his ear, sipping whiskey from Dad's old decanter. My father's initials still etched in the glass. That tiny detail hurt more than any betrayal ever could. I stood there for a minute just watching, remembering every time he used to ruffle my hair and call me the runt. I almost left. But then I saw him pull a drawer open and take out a folder, the same manila folders from the video. He placed it on the desk, glanced around, then pulled something from inside. A set of international transfer slips, and one fresh document with both his and Adam's signatures. I wasn't supposed to see that, but it was enough to confirm everything. I lifted my phone and started recording through the glass. He leaned back in his chair, chuckled softly, and said into the phone, "Yeah, by Friday the account will be cleared. Danny won't even know what hit him. He's a kid. He'll crawl back to the dirt like always." Something snapped in me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Still talking about me, huh?" Luke froze. His phone clattered onto the table. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. He just stared, like he'd seen a ghost he thought he buried years ago. "Danny," he said slowly, smoothing his shirt, trying to regain that confident tone. "You shouldn't be here." "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." I moved closer. "I saw the papers, Luke. I know what you and Adam did. The fake projects, the shell companies. Dad didn't give you his empire. You stole it while he was dying." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Empire? You think Dad built an empire?" "He built a business. We turned it into something real. You were never part of that, Danny. You were just the sentimental one, the dreamer. Dad saw it too." "No," I said quietly, "Dad saw through you. That's why he left me this." I held up the phone. The color drained from his face when he saw the screen. The last message from Dad. The one that said, "Don't trust them." "It's all in the cabin." He slammed his glass down. "You think that means anything? You have no idea what world you're stepping into. You're out of your depth. Walk away, Danny. Take whatever dignity you've got left and leave before Adam finds out you're poking around." "Adam already knows," I said. "He sent a message. I didn't delete it. Luke's jaw clenched. For a second, I saw fear behind those cold eyes. Then he exhaled, grabbed his jacket, and said, "You've made a mistake, little brother. A big one." "Maybe," I said. "But at least this time, it's mine." I turned and walked out before he could reply. My hands were shaking as I got in my car, but I had the footage. His confession, his words, the documents in his hand. That was proof. Maybe not enough to put him in jail yet, but enough to start the fire. When I got home, Sam called. "Danny, we froze the transfer." The state board approved the motion. They can't touch a single account for 72 hours. My voice cracked. "We've got him on tape, Sam. I recorded him." There was silence, then a small laugh, the kind that sounded like hope for the first time in months. "Then it's over. Son, this might just work, but it wasn't over. Not even close." The next morning, my door was wide open. The lock had been broken clean off. My drawers were pulled, papers scattered, coffee table flipped. Whoever it was didn't take money. They took the folder from Dad's cabin. Every original paper, every letter, gone. I dropped to my knees, breathing heavy, scanning the floor like maybe it was all a bad dream. Then I noticed something taped to the mirror. A small square of yellow paper. It said, "You should have walked away." I called Sam. He told me to stay somewhere safe. I stayed at Maria's house for 2 nights, barely sleeping. The fear was real now. These weren't arguments over inheritance anymore. This was about erasing me completely. But Maria didn't flinch. She helped me back up, said, "You can't let them take your father's name and call it victory. You fight back, not with anger, but with proof." So I did. I worked with Sam to refile the audit, attach the video recording, the text message, everything I could. Then we leaked a copy anonymously to a small-town journalist named Claire Robbins, the same reporter who'd covered the coal timber safety violations years ago. 3 days later, the story hit. Headline: Local timber kings accused of multi-million-dollar fraud. Family whistleblower comes forward. It spread like wildfire. The bank froze their corporate cards. The state opened an inquiry. Even the sheriff, who'd played golf with Adam every weekend, showed up at their office with warrants. I didn't feel joy when I saw them in handcuffs. I didn't feel triumph when reporters shoved cameras in their faces. I just felt silence, like the noise of 10 years had finally stopped. But revenge, real revenge, wasn't about their punishment. It was about reclaiming what they thought I'd never have again, my father's truth. And by the end of that week, I had one last thing left to do. Something Dad's message hinted at, but never said directly. Because there was still one file I hadn't opened, one hidden folder on that old locked phone that might explain why he left me the secret in the first place. I couldn't sleep that night. My head felt hollowed out from all the noise, the sirens, the reporters, the way the town turned its head to watch the brothers fall. Maria's kitchen clock kept time like a judge. Sam had done everything right. Freeze orders, emergency filings, the public leak that made the state move. But there was still one thing I hadn't touched on that phone. One hidden file Dad had tucked away like a seed. When Maria fell asleep, I took her old laptop and the phone into the back room. I had the file directory open, fingers shaking, and there it was. eFinal.will, hidden deep inside an encrypted folder. My breath stopped. I'd already played the video Dad left, found the cabin papers, posted the proof, watched my brothers get arrested. But this felt different, like a lock that only opened for someone who knew the right words. I ran it. The screen filled with Dad's face, older and weaker, but his voice was steady. He looked straight at the camera. "Ethan," he said, "if you're seeing this, I hope you listened. The world I built for our family got twisted. I knew they'd try to take it. So I wrote a clause. It isn't a chase for money. It's about trust. I put a fail-safe into our corporate charter. If anyone is proven to have used company funds for personal enrichment, with forged documents and shell companies, the board must, by law I established, transfer majority ownership to the named beneficiary. I chose you, not because you were the oldest or loudest, but because you were the one who kept asking questions when things felt wrong." He paused, and for a moment I could hear the years in his chest. "I filed it with our lawyers. I put it behind locks because these men are not ashamed of greedy hands. They're good at hiding. This phone has the key. The video you found, the cabin files, they were the path. You proved enough. Now do what you must. Don't be cruel. Be smart." The file ended, but another window opened. A scanned, signed, notarized copy of the company charter amendment. It had my full name typed in as the successor beneficiary, and it had a seal. Below it was a set of legal instructions and a contact list. State regulators, the bank, the law firm, the public notary. Dad had done it all. He'd used his final breath to make sure his work couldn't disappear. My hands trembled so hard I had to sit. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a late inheritance dropped by chance. It was his plan, slow and brutal and careful. He'd expected their greed, and he'd planned for it. He trusted me to finish it. The next morning, Sam met me at my father's old office, the same place where I'd once handed out coffee and swept sawdust. He scanned the document like a man double-checking a life raft. "This is airtight," he said. "Your father was a better lawyer than his vanity let on." He smiled, and for the first time since all this began, I felt something like calm. We filed the formal notice with the board that day. The amendment in the charter required a board vote only in specific cases, and one of them was fraud proven by legal audit. Sam presented the audit, the video, and the transfer slips. The board had no ground to stand on. The law was clear. Within 48 hours, the registrar notified the corporate bank to transfer controlling shares to me, Ethan Cole, majority beneficiary per charter amendment. All week the town watched like the sea watching a storm. Adam and Luke were still in cuffs, their faces pale and small on TV. Lawyers scrambled. Their friends looked away. The men who used to tip their hats to my father now came to my door, crooked with apology, or thin with expectation. I didn't answer most of them. On the day the papers were signed, I stood in the old mill office where my father used to sit. I looked at the carved initials on the decanter, the faded photo of the mill when it was just a two-man operation. It smelled like sawdust and old promises. Sam handed me the final certificate. My name was on it in black ink. My hands didn't shake this time. I called a meeting that evening and invited every worker, foremen, drivers, factory hands, the people who actually made Cole Timber a living thing. They came in, eyes tired but curious. I sat at the head of the table and told the truth. I told them what Adam and Luke did. I told them about the stolen money, the phantom projects, the safety corners they cut that put men at risk. Then I told them what I planned. No grand speech. No threats. Just facts and a promise. We rebuilt, I said. We pay back the hours everyone lost. We open accounts for transparency. No secret vendors. No private projects on company time. If any of you see something wrong, you come to me. We fix it, we do it right. We make sure Cole Timber is a place you're proud of again. They listened. Some nodded, some wiped eyes. A few men I'd seen my whole life stood and clapped. That noise, honest and full, was the first thing I felt that belonged to me. Then came the harder part, dealing with the brothers. Their lawyers tried to fight everything. They lobbied people in town. They offered buyouts to anyone who would leave quietly. But the charter amendment, the audit, the public pressure, it all held. The state regulators closed loopholes they'd been exploiting. Banks rejected their attempts to claim company funds. Each failed attempt made their faces look more hollow. In private, Adam came to my office once, unsteady. "Ethan, please," he said. "We made mistakes. Let's talk this out. I can give you a paycheck. He choked. I listened for a while. Then I said something I wouldn't have believed the old me could say. "You broke Dad's trust," I told him. "You broke our family. You sold it for what? For a boat, a bigger house? Applause from men who don't know what it is to get up at dawn? You can beg and bargain. The law has already spoken. You'll have to live with what you did." He left without another word. No pleading, no promises. Just the echo of a man who had nothing left to hide behind. Months later, Cole Timber reopened a community fund we'd closed during the scandal. We paid back families who had been shorted wages. We repaired homes that had been promised but never built. We hired local men who'd lost jobs when Adam ran private projects. I set up an independent audit committee with Maria, Sam, and 2 workers elected by the crew. We made the books public. The company began to breathe again, honest and slow. I never felt triumphant in the way I thought I would. Taking the company back didn't erase the pain, and fixing what broke didn't bring Dad back. But the mill's bell rang again, and the trucks rolled out full. That sound felt like forgiveness. the kind that comes when you do the hard thing for the right reason. On the anniversary of my 18th birthday, I sat in my old truck for a long time. I looked at the tiny black phone in my palm, the one Dad left me like a loaded seed. I thought about that night in the living room when everyone laughed, when they told me I'd been left nothing. I smiled then because I'd learned something important. Revenge wasn't about making them small in public or watching them fall. It was about using what was taken, evidence, truth, law, to build something that lasted. I had taken back more than money. I'd taken back respect, safety, work, and the story of my family. I started the engine and drove to the old cabin by the mill. The light inside was warm. I sat on the porch steps and looked out over the yard where Dad taught me to measure twice and cut once. I whispered, "You were right, Dad. You were always thinking 2 steps ahead." Then I tapped the black phone against my palm and said very quietly, into the dark, "We're home."